So chapter 20 is, like I said, it is part 1 of 2. All right, so what is the most famous prayer? If you could choose one prayer that is the most famous in our tradition. Shema, yes! Shema is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. We say it 3 times a day, and we cover our eyes so we can focus in and meditate. What is the meaning of Shema? It's, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And this is the prayer that people throughout our generations have said before they die and before they choose to die, like we talked about with this sanctifying our lives for the sake of God throughout history, with the Crusades, with all this terrible persecution. Jewish people have chosen death over deny their Jewishness, and this is the words that they left the world saying. So this sentence is integral to our faith, and it comes from the written Torah, Deuteronomy. But the question is, what does it mean, the Lord is one?
There's no other lords.
Yeah. There's no other gods. We believe in one God. And I'm actually teaching the Hebrew school kids because the parshas of the week right now is Lech Lecha, Vayera, when Abraham discovered monotheism. He was the first one to come to the logical conclusion that there is only one God, invisible, omnipotent, omniscient, omni-everything God. And at the time, this was hugely revolutionary because at the time, people worshipped idols. It wasn't just like, there's this film that I showed the kids called Young Abraham. I love it because it really portrays the culture at the time. It wasn't just like something they did on the side. Like, it was central to social functions, family, community. Everything revolved around the worship of idols. They had idol shops, the same way I told the teens the other day, the same way like we have Apple stores, right? The different gadgets they had, like the idols were their gadgets. They had the ones that did this and the ones that did that. It was their consumer culture. So everything revolved around that. And Abraham was the only one ever to be able to think independently and say, like, wait a minute, let's take a step back. Does this make sense? And he did this with a process of elimination, with a logical conclusion. The story goes that he was in a cave. He was raised by his mother. He was banished for whatever reason. And he grew up at 3 years old, comes out of this cave, and he sees the sunrise. And he says, the sun brings so much warmth. It's energy, right? Energy comes, like, it's the frequencies of the sun, all that, right? That must be God. I should probably worship the sun for rising and bringing me warmth and light. But then he sees the sun set. And then he says, okay, it's not constant. So remember, he's a child, so he's thinking, all right, what takes its place? The moon. Should I worship the moon? But then he sees it's a cycle. So then he says, okay, but what else is powerful? So he starts to analyze different aspects of nature, noticing that the common thread with all of them is that they're temporary and that they have their place, they come and go. None of them are all power, all-encompassing or all-knowing. None of them have the qualities that he, as a 3-year-old little smart boy, thinks should be a godly quality. So he comes to the conclusion that God must be outside of this universe, encompassing the universe, invisible, and creator of all of it. And he sets out with his life to teach this teaching of monotheism. So we're taught that he's the father of our Jewish religion. And of course we can go on a whole history lesson, what happens next after that. But one more thing about Abraham is that in a few chapters ago, we studied how our souls are engineered by Abraham. It's our spiritual soul comes from the spiritual DNA of Abraham's soul. So he basically you know how we talk about intergenerational trauma? Like, he basically fused this belief with who he was and then passed it down to his family line, which is the Jewish people. So this quality of Jewish qualities can be traced back to Abraham and his belief in one God. So now with the Shema. And also, what's the first of the 10 commandments? I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. And the second commandment, do not have any other gods. So these beliefs, the first commandment, the second commandment, are central to the Jewish religion. So, the chapter 20 of Tanya is going to say, okay, well, let's zoom out for a minute. Where did we come from? We came from trying to figure out how we're going to get close to God, when God is abstract, and what we feel more immediately is our physical existence. And so the Alter Rebbe explains that we have two souls, and it's true that we feel physical because we have a physical soul and we have a spiritual soul, a godly soul. They're both kind of spiritual. And our life's mission is to get in touch with our godly soul, and then we can meditate and create love and this relationship with God. But we can also, the second way, which we've been studying, is unleash the natural love that we got as an inheritance from Abraham. But now we're going to say, wait a minute. Let's take a minute and philosophize about God. Who is God? What is God? So God tells us, do not have any other gods. What are other gods? And not only that, but the entire Torah, we're taught, is actually based on these two commandments. In fact, in the story of the giving of the Torah, the story goes, it's actually written in the words, that God says the first commandment, and the Jewish people, well, this part is in Midrash, the Jewish people die. Their souls go up. Kind of like what we talked about, how you have the soul has this, it's a candle, last week it's a candle, and it just going up. When they heard God's voice, the soul just went up, and they died. And they came back to life. God sent their souls back to their bodies, they came back to life, and they heard the second commandment, and their souls go up, and they die. And then God brings them back to life, and the Jewish people are like, okay, listen, this is amazing, but it's freaking scary. We don't really want to keep dying. So please, Moses, you're used to hearing God's voice. Can you please share the rest of the commandments for us? We trust you. We heard the real thing, and now we see it's real. So Moses did so. But that was okay, because the first two commandments contain within them the entire Torah. So when the Jews heard the first two commandments from God, they received energetically the entire Torah from God. And this chapter is going to explain how the whole Torah is in these first two chapters. And the answer is it's a paradigm shift, okay? Back to the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This one, according to the Kabbalah, is more than just the only God. What it means, according to the Kabbalah, is that God is the only true existence at all. So now we're getting philosophical, okay? What does it mean? Do we exist? Do I exist? Is the table in front of me? Now, yes. We are not a complete illusion. We are having this conversation. However, is the world a true existence, or is it a dependent existence? I like to use the example, which is a bit of a foreshadowing to chapter 1, of an image on a computer screen. Okay, so the image, you're watching a movie, and the movie is there. It's not like you're not watching a movie. You are seeing the scene, but is the scene a true existence, or is it dependent on the electrical current that either the battery power or even better, wall power for this example? as soon as, we all hate it, like there's a power outage, and oh no, what happened to the movie? It's gone, and if you're showing kids, what happened, right? Or even like, the image on the TV screen or the computer screen or whatever electronic gadget is a dependent image. It's dependent on the electrical current and all the technology that follows to give you that image. If not, aside from battery powered, which kind of, using a more direct example with something that's plugged into the wall, as soon as you unplug it from the wall, the image is gone. So using this example to understand the world is there. We do exist, but we do not exist independently. The Kabbalah teaches that we are on life support from God's energy. And further to that, also a bit of foreshadowing to chapter 21, but also foreshadowing to entire book of Tanya, the third book of the Tanya. This is the first book. The third book is called The Gate of Unity and Belief, Shar Yichud Ve'emunah. And that is, the whole book is about understanding this idea of this dependent existence and the unity and how God is really one and everything is God. So that's the long version. Not only that, there's Hasidic discourses through every one of the Chabad rabbis, and there's 7, explaining this. So I'm bringing references from all of those places, or whatever I've studied, to understand chapter 20, which explains it in an analogy of human speech, which we will get to. But before we get to the analogy that Tanya gives in chapter 20, I'm going to give you a little bit of a crash course. Okay. So, where was I? We had the computer screen on life support. So the entire world is on life support from God's energy. And we're taught, how did God create the world? If you open up the book of Genesis, which we read in the synagogue 3 weeks ago, it says, and God said, let there be light. And God said, let there be a firmament. And God said, let there be. And we're taught there's 10. If you count them, you can find 10 of them. So we're taught there are 10 utterances or 10 sentences God said to create the world. And he said, and it existed. God said, let there be light, vayehi or, and there was light. So how did God create the world? By speaking. And the Kabbalah teaches that God is constantly speaking these words. Now, he does not have a physical mouth, so the idea of God's speech is beyond our understanding. But so to speak, God speaking these words and constantly fueling the energy. And that's kind of like the plugging in the wall. The electricity has to be constantly flowing, actively flowing for the image to work. It's not like a battery pack. It's like an electrical current coming from the source of electricity. That's the world is on life support. And we're taught that if God would to withdraw his will and his speech from the world for even a moment, the world would cease to exist. That's how dependent we are. So not to say that we're not really having this conversation. We are. But the fact that we are here to have this conversation is completely dependent on God willing us into existence with his speech. And now I think we're ready to explain this through the analogy that Tanya brings. But before we do that, actually, let's read a little bit inside. So, starting on the top of the page that has the break. This is the first page. It's hard to tell. So, it is well known that the positive commandment to believe in God's unity and admonition concerning idolatry, which form the first 2 commandments in the Decalogue, I am God, and you shall have no other gods, comprise the entire Torah. Now, turning to the other side of the page, the third line, there's a prayer in the Shabbat prayers that says, Atahu ad shaloni raha olam, Atahu Misha Nivra. So you are he who was before the world was created, and you are he who is since the world was created. What is this saying? God is before the world was created and after. He's constant. But not only is he before and after, he's the same. So just the same way he was one and the only one before the world was created, the only existence, after the world was created, he's still the only true existence. That's what we're saying. A lot of the prayers that we say, that we pray, that are in the Siddur, and the line before that, the top line is a quote from the Rosh Hashanah prayers. All of those prayers were composed by Kabbalists. And they knew what they were saying when they wrote these prayers. They chose words that encapsulate huge ideas. And that's why we use these prayers, because there are gifts to us. This is a little bit of a tangent, which we talked about a bit at Rosh Hashanah, Chalabek. But, the mitzvah of prayer is just literally to pour out your heart to God if you need him. But then we have this gift of the liturgy, of the prayers that are like portals to what's actually going on. So a lot of the times the Alter Rebbe, who calls his entire book Likutei Amarim, it's on the top, chapter 20, Likutei Amarim. It means a compilation of sayings. So the whole time in the Alter Rebbe's, I'm making this up, don't quote me, but roughly 50% of what he says is quotes. Is quote to quote to quote, all from our tradition, the prayers, the written Torah, the oral Torah, from this part of oral Torah, from that part of oral Torah. It's all sourced. So we've got some quotes from prayers. And here's another one. Ani Hashem lo shiniti. I am God, I have not changed. I don't know where that one's from. I can check in this book in a minute. Okay. So, and now I'm at the bottom in English. Just as God was one alone, single and unique before they were created, so he is one alone, single and unique after he created them. How can it be so? What of all the creatures that exist beside him? Yet it is so, because all is not beside. This is a huge, huge sentence that the Alter Rebbe, it's like a mantra that he's always comes up. It's like not a mantra, more of a refrain, like a chorus, all the time in all of his teachings. And I just bought another in New York. I just bought a book of his discourses, of Hasidic discourses, apart from the Tanya, that are mind-blowing. Comes up all throughout. It's like this. Mishum, it's the last line. Mishum dekula kamei kala chashiv ucha'ayin ve'efes mamish. Yet it is so, because all is as naught beside him, as if absolutely non-existent. This is a big statement. And there's a reason why it's repeated again and again, because it's not, you can take it at face value, but it's way, way, way more than face value. So take a minute and feel, I'm going to read it again, and take a minute to feel how your body reacts to that. All is not beside him, as if absolutely non-existent. And there's no right or wrong feeling, whatever comes up for you. Okay, let's think about that feeling for a minute. You know what? Should we discuss it or should we come back to it? What do you like?
Let's discuss it.
Let's
it made
discuss
me feel
it.
sad.
Sad. I'm not surprised anymore.
No, I don't. Maybe I'm too egocentric and my response will be that. But I feel like if it is non-existent, that means we are part of him already. Like if we're back.
Beautiful.
So that's right.
Any other feelings that you want to? You don't have to. If you feel like sharing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we're going to freeze that experience. We're going to do the whole intellectual exercise about speech, and then we'll conclude and come back to it and get into it. Okay? But you're not wrong. Okay. So, the Tanya would like to use the analogy of speech to explain how the world is dependent, and nothing compared to God. Okay? So it's like a comparison exercise. Now, this is a limited analogy because in chapter 21, what the Alter Rebbe is going to do is going to say, but the analogy was great, but it's really not good enough. So know that's coming, all right? So this is a limited analogy. It's an imperfect analogy. But the reason why the Alter Rebbe is using speech is because how did God create the world? Speech, utterances. Yet it is an imperfect analogy. Here we go. So when a human being, when we speak, the words that we say where do they come from? Where do the words, where do they originate? You know, we don't just, they're not just motor, like we're saying something, we're saying ideas. Where does it come from?
Our thoughts.
Our thoughts, right? So we have the speech. There's two side-by-side examples. I'll use both. We have our speech, which comes from the power of speech. Like we have the ability to communicate. That ability to communicate is so much bigger than the actual words we say, right? Because the ability can take us anywhere. It's almost like when I was swimming really, 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 really far from the shore, and I was so far away from the shore that I could go anywhere, right? It was all equidistance to where I was. So it's like you have the power of speech. It can take you. You can say myriads of things with that power of speech. So the word is small compared to the power of speech. The power of speech is small compared to the power of thought, which precedes the power of speech. Because speech comes from thought, and thought, the words, right? Because we think in pictures and words, come from the power of thought and speech. But the power of thought and speech are nothing compared to who we are. Because we can be a person without thinking, right? We can be a child, doesn't have words, maybe they have images, but they're there even if they're not thinking about Aristotle. So a person and our feelings and our emotions and who we are as a person is so much bigger than our power of thought, which is so much bigger than our power of speech, which is so much bigger than the word. How do we, and then the Tanya goes on and says, how do we speak? Well, first, we have more than that feeling is an appreciation. So if you could trace the word all the way back to its source, it would first come from an appreciation. Then appreciation would produce an emotion. Then the emotion would go back to the brain and figure out language or understanding this feeling of why do I love that? Why? It's like a feedback. First there's an appreciation, then there's a love, then there's back to thinking, and then the thinking and the thought goes to speech, the ability to say it, and then you say it. We're not going to we could spend a long time analyzing that whole process, but the point of the process is literally just to show how a word is insignificant compared to the process that got it there. The word, the God of the world was created from the word. Who's the creator? That whole process leads us back to God. So the world, this logic pattern is basically to say that the world exists, but as very, very, very limited and insignificant compared to the power that created it. There's another reason why the Alter Rebbe uses this example, and that's to show that there is a process, that the world was created via a process to get from here, God's infinity, to a very, very, very finite experience. And that process we're going to talk about more in chapter 21. But now we need to use this logic to bring us back home. How does the first 2 commandments contain the entire Torah? But before we do that, I think we can have the conversation about the nothingness. So, Katya, you were really onto something. Actually, Rabbi Jacobson at the retreat was sharing, he said that for years he was triggered by the sentence, all is naught besides God. For years. And I mean, he's teaching, he's a rabbi, and he understands it, but it was still triggering to him because what's happening? It's exposing the conflict of our godly soul and our animal soul. Our animal soul wants to exist. Our godly soul wants to fly back to God like a candle to a flame to its source. And being a human, imperfect human being, our animal soul, our ego, is triggered. It's like, excuse me, I don't want to be nothing. Egos want to exist. That's what they're here. That's what they do. But then he shared something beautiful. He said that his mentor took him through a process and said, imagine you've accomplished the pinnacle of your goals. You are so famous, like you type the Y into Google and the name Yessie Jacobson pops up right away. You know, like you've got 1 trillion views, like you've made it. That is nothing compared to who you are.
Yeah.
And what I felt when he shared that, well, maybe I'll let you feel what you feel. Translating that back into what's important to you and what your goals are, and imagining that you're accomplishing those goals. Yet, you are way, way greater than the accomplishment of those goals.
It's really hard though when you feel moments of like feeling purposeless, like you have no
Explain.
purpose. I think it's hard to imagine that you are more than your actions when you feel like, oh, I don't have a purpose. You know, when you have those feelings of, you know, some days you're like, oh, I'm doing things, I'm helping people.
Ego is happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When ego is happy, we feel like we're going to lose something if we don't have, like, don't take away who I am, right? Because ego. But what happens if you don't have those capabilities? Do you lose your self-worth?
Like if suddenly you couldn't do all the things.
Elderly people struggle with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People who retire struggle with this.
Yes, or people who, people with
God
ALS,
forbid.
God
Yeah.
forbid, like extreme cases, or
Right.
people who just feel like the rug's been pulled out, but under their feet. I know some people who are having midlife crisis with their careers, and all of a sudden they feel like, what do I do? Who am I? What am I good at? What's my purpose?
This is what I'm saying.
I think that can even coexist, though. I mean, you can, talking about the happy ego, you can achieve great things, and still feel that void. I think the ego can be unhappy while you're still going through those motions, interestingly enough. To your point of there is more than this. I think that is very true.
I felt comfort.
For sure.
I felt comfort when he said that, because I felt like when all else fails, I'll say my sentence. When all else fails, the real meaning is not what I can do.
Yeah.
The real meaning is my soul, which is limitless and godly. And I am intrinsically valuable no matter what. You fall back on what truly matters. And it's kind of like the short, long way, the one where we find out who we really are. It's really that same conversation. It's really saying, all that matters is, well, I lost my train of thought, but
you said we have intrinsic value.
Yes, so we have intrinsic value. In other words,
Is that our
No.
godly soul? Because of,
yeah. And that's what we do when we uncover the godly soul that's within us. Then we uncover that what truly matters is our connection with God. And the reason why we have a godly soul on this earth is to be godly people on earth. Which then answers the question of how is these two commandments encapsulating the entire Torah? And the answer is, if it's all about God, if that's really what matters, then of course we will do whatever God is asking us to do, which basically includes all the due commandments, the 248 due commandments. And then the flip side, do not worship other gods. It does not only mean do not worship idols, it means do not worship outside existence as important.
so then is it, what's the word? It's conditional then, isn't it?
Explain.
Well, what if you don't do all the commandments and you do some of the non-things,
Mm-hmm.
then do you still have intrinsic value?
100%. Well, you answer the question. What happens to our soul? Does our soul anything ever happen to our soul? It's there. It's like a diamond. It can be in the rough, but it's always intrinsically valuable. It's always there. You cannot extricate your soul from within you. And actually later chapters of Tanya are going to take us down that road. It's going to say, but what if I've made a mistake? What if I have bad thoughts? What if this? What if do? And it's going to help us through that human experience in chapters, 27 and 28 and 29. We're going to get there. But for understanding how does the entire Torah get included in that? So it goes back to basic existence. What is true for you? When somebody says, I want to, let's use the example of a marriage, okay? Husband says to wife, wife says to husband, it's easier. Wife says to husband, I really, really want you to come home at 6 o'clock on time today. And husband says, okay, I got that. It's important to me. But then on the way home, he had a phone call and things happened and he got stuck behind. And so he comes home at 6:20. And wife is like, how did that happen? Like, I thought I was important to you. And husband says, yeah, but you are, but I also have other things that are important to me. So if you have other things that are important to you, then 6 o'clock is not 6 o'clock. God's saying, I'm the only one. All right? So if I'm the only one that's important, whatever I tell you not to do, you're not going to do it because you don't have any other priorities. Now, this is very extreme. All of us, none of us are perfect, but in the perfect sense, you won't do it. If that is so clear right in front of your eyes, like God is my soul, God is my existence, and therefore everything else is secondary, and the only thing that I care truly about is God, you won't do anything. Nothing else comes into your priority, into your field of vision, and you just staying focused. It's like the husband says, I know that's really nice, but like wife is top priority, and I'm going to be home no matter what. It's very nice, like, that's good. Oh, sport. Oh, the politics. Oh, that's really interesting. I love it. But like, my priorities are my priorities. So, and in the positive as well. Everything is God is the most important thing to me. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do whatever it takes that God to do the 248. This is we're talking black and white. Mm-hmm. We're making it black and white. Our human experience, we did this, we don't let this sentence erase all of the chapters of Tanya we got that helped us get here, okay? And this is not the end. But what it is a black and white statement. Human beings We have a godly soul. If God wanted us to be robots like that, he would give us only a godly soul. And then we would have those, it would be clear, we would have those priorities, it would be simple. We would be spiritual robots, like what the angels are. But God didn't do that. He gave us an animal soul, and therefore it is not black and white for our human experience. But it's helpful to know the truth of the matter, the black and white facts, to help ground us. Our true existence is our godly soul. And that, the beauty, and back to the everything is nothing compared to God, back to that statement. Everything may be nothing compared to God, but we are God. We have God. Our true existence is God. And therefore we are limitless. And we are the something.
I'm wondering if, like, sometimes, you know how if God is sending us this God energy, like when we're charging the phone and it's connected. But then you take the phone off the charger and you use it, and then the battery goes down. For us, it's like sometimes you feel like you're using up the goodness
Beautifully stated.
that you've filled yourself up with. And then there's sometimes a point where you feel that empty. Like, I need
That makes
to
sense.
plug back in.
Absolutely. I mean, this is charging. When we
Right.
study Torah, especially the mysticism of Torah, it's like the supercharge. You have like the fast chargers and slow. Like the mysticism is a fast charge, right?
Mhm.
This is what we do to charge our souls. When we pray, we charge our souls. When I was thinking about it as I was preparing, I'm like, oh my God, like Rabbi Jacobson's talk was totally charging me up.
Mhm.
Like that's what it was. Because as he was talking, and I mean, it was so beautiful, I felt like, can I hold on to this feeling? Like, can, like, is this being recorded? Was like what I thought. But also like, I want this feeling to stay forever, right? And that's what you're talking about. That's why it's important to stay charged. But also, that's the short, long way. That's when we get inspired and the truth of our existence is clear to us, and we're like, oh my God, I'm right there. Of course, this is my mission. Of course, that's who I am. And it's just so of course to me. I want to stay of course all the time. But then you need the charges to keep the of course experience. And that's why the Tanya gives us the tool of meditation to be able to generate our own dedication so that we're not totally dependent on the charge. So he gives us kind of like not a battery pack, but like better than a battery pack, like a generator. He gives us a generator where we can generate our own like inspiration.
It's so interesting because I think when you're completely depleted, as you accurately stated, you know it. When you're supercharged, you know it. You can feel it.
Yeah.
When you're in the in between, when you're doing the work, that's when we start to always question things and we're second guessing everything. And it's not until you reach the end, I guess. There's no end, but in those moments when when people are speaking the words or verbalizing things that are extraordinarily meaningful and powerful, you feel that energy.
Yeah. You
But
can recognize truth when
you
you see it.
recognize it.
And that's what I was like another time. But like that's literally what I experienced when I was listening to his talk. I'm like, this is what it feels like to be inspired.
Yeah.
And it was such a luxury because so much of the time, rightfully, this is the bulk of what we're supposed to be doing is the work, is studying on our own and reading and grappling and asking ourselves hard questions. That's the work. Once in a while, it's really nice to go to the spiritual spa.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
Because the world throws so many
Yeah.
curveballs.
And sometimes the
Distractions.
distractions are internal.
Yeah.
Like if you have anxiety that runs in the family, or if you have, even just normal human feelings can be really intense and really
Confusing.
really confusing, frustrating. So it's the work that we do, and it's the inspiration that helps us buoy our journey. And I'm looking forward to continuing, like, talking about how our animal soul can become our ally, and like this is like, remember this is a black and white statement, but the Tanya is big, so we're going to keep journeying through how we incorporate this and how we stay connected. Self-compassion is a huge part of this, right? Because God created us to be imperfect, so therefore we need to be compassionate to ourselves when that imperfection plays out.
I have a question. In the Tanya, is there any explanation as to why God created this?
That is the mystery of all things. I'm going to give you the short answer, but this is the question that I asked at 14 years old. And I really encourage preteens. I think it's really important for 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. I think that's the sweet spot for questioning. It's really important to ask these hard questions and come to your, especially if you were like me, I was brought up, not only was I brought up observant, but I was brought up Chabad with all of this knowledge that I heard my parents teaching all the time. I was there listening, and yet it was very important for me to understand it as an independent thinker and choose it. So I didn't get the answer at 14 years old, but asking the question was important.
Why am I here?
Why am I here? Why am I here?
Not only me, but
Why are we here?
Yeah, well,
What's
sure.
the purpose of the world?
What is?
So the answer, in short, is that God wanted it to be this way. And when you really, really want something, you can't always explain it. I just want it. A true craving doesn't have a reason. So we have desire.
You know, you can't argue with that.
So that's the sentence. Literally, you can't argue with that, is the sentence that is quoted. It says, you can't ask a question on a taiva. Taiva is the Yiddishized word ta'ava. Ta'ava means a craving. Taiva means the Yiddish way to pronounce it. You cannot ask questions about a desire. And you literally said that sentence. There's no, you can try to analyze because it's delicious, because there has this, and it has the bitter and the sweet, and it's just perfectly combined. But then you're like, well, why do you like that? I don't know, I just do. It just tastes good, right? Why does it taste good to you? Speechless, right?
That seems like an animal soul kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So does God
Well,
have an
animal soul and godly soul both have desire.
Right, but if God has the desire, then does God have an animal soul?
The good question. So the power of desire is Kabbalistically a very, 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 very deep, holy, abstract level. It's beyond wisdom. It's beyond, like, we're talking about, this is, it's a very esoteric, supernal holiness, energy, spiritual energy. God created animal souls in order for them to be convincing with parallel experience to the godly soul, right? So we have desire in our godly soul, and we have desire in our animal soul. And we can understand desire usually by understanding what it feels like in our animal soul. We can then understand what it would feel like in our godly soul, and then we can maybe try to philosophize of what it's like for God. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
The Kabbalistic term for it is Atik Yemin. Okay, like it's really high up there, and I don't understand it. Yeah.
The mystery of mysteries.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually part of the Keter. So we have the God has the Chesed, the three intellectual, 7 emotional. Above that is the crown. The crown is considered the desire, the pleasure. So there's higher is desire, lower is pleasure. Those are, or actually maybe the other way around. That's up there in spirituality. Okay, but it's very. I love like that you asked that question, because it's just like, it just touches on like where it's really at. Yeah.
Was there some concept that like God was lonely, or and he wanted human.
God, it says that in the Torah.
companion?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that. Is that
Well,
an
no,
answer,
that's
maybe?
that's Adam. Adam didn't want to be
Adam
alone.
Was
Yeah.
lonely.
It really boils back to he wanted this. Yeah. So yeah, the answer is that there is no answer. How fun. Yeah. But it's the mystery of God. If we were to understand God, he wouldn't be God, because he would be within, I like to say it's like you have him in your hand. Like, oh yeah, I get it. This is, but then how did he create you if you understand him? He has to be beyond our ability to comprehend to that he,
No, but there could be an explanation, like, we're little bits of energy that needs clearing, or that we need to be more godly.
and there is
unite.
yes, there is all that, and all that's there.
The broken
But
shards.
I'm skipping all that to get back to the real, where
Okay.
the limit. Okay, so yes, and we will do that. We will talk about
The
what.
broken shards and.
Yes, the broken shards, exactly,
Repair.
and we're going to talk about that next chapter a little bit. Yeah, we were going to talk about that, and not just next chapter, all the way through. However, I did want you to just know that there is a dead end. The dead end is just desire of God. Yeah. Shall we meditate?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
So we're going to do this together again. Let's ground our feet on the floor. Let's close our eyes. Let's begin by taking very deep breaths. As you breathe, let any feelings that want to be felt come up inside of you. Notice the feelings. See them. We talked about a lot of things. So take a moment to notice what your body feels like after this experience. I'm going to take you through a meditation to slow down the process of some of the realizations that we talked about in an analytical way. Let's see what they feel like. So imagine that you are excelling at your goals. What are your goals? The goal could be to accomplish something, to be a certain way, to access a certain flow, to excel in a field. Imagine yourself embodying those goals in the fullest way that you could ever dream of. And allow yourself to let that dream take root in your imagination. Imagine it's really possible. Allow yourself to imagine unlimited, instead of limiting yourself to what you were maybe settling for in your goals. imagine that you surpassed those limitations. And you're actually accessing what you really almost don't even let yourself wish for. Feel what it feels like inside to reach that level of success. And now, imagine that this place you're in of incredible, limitless success. Well, I wouldn't say limitless, but extreme success is not your greatest. In fact, you, deep inside, who you are, is in fact greater than your largest accomplishment and success that you feel right now. In fact, your true potential is far greater, exponentially greater than your wildest dreams of success that you can even imagine. Who you really are is limitless. Who you really are is godly. It's your godly soul within you that is not defined by its accomplishments, but rather the truth of its infinite existence. And therefore, in addition to everything that you have accomplished and will accomplish, you are always valuable. You are always important. And you will always be. Because you are infinite. You are a piece of Hashem. And now, allow yourself to be guided by your inner truth. Allow yourself to be guided by your limitless self. Putting into context all of your talents and accomplishments and skills as wonderful, yet not who you are, and not all you can be. You don't need to be defined by what you've done or what you will do. That too, but more. And now you open your eyes when you're ready.